Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Peter Johnson. I'm the relatively new Vice President of Development for the National Review Institute. I'm based in Naples, Florida, but get all around the country for NRI events, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you. Today, we have George Gilder with us to talk about his National Review cover story, Life After Capitalism, which appeared in the November 1st issue and is available on National Review online. This article was made possible by an NRI initiative designed to fund long-form investigative journalism in National Review. George Gilder is a senior resident fellow at the American Institute for Economic Research. Mr. Gilder is one of the leading economic and technological thinkers of the past 40 years and is the author of 19 books. And he is a founding fellow of the Discovery Institute.
I'm co-founder of the Discovery Institute.
Okay. Co-founder.
That's really my main.
Where he began the study of information theory. He will join David Bahnsen in conversation. David is an NRI trustee and hosts National Review Capital Record podcast. He is also managing partner of the Bahnsen Group, a bi-coastal private wealth management firm. David is consistently named as one of the top financial advisors in America by Barron's, Forbes, and the Financial Times. His new book, There's No Free Lunch, will be released on Tuesday and is available today on Kindle. So go pre-order David's new book or download it today. Congratulations, David, and I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, and I'm looking forward to this conversation with our friend George Gilder. And in my case, George is more than just a friend. He is truly a mentor, and I believe an ideological hero, and this latest piece we're going to discuss is certainly evidence of that. So I thank you for the introduction. Thank you for mentioning the book. But I will say that even though George did not write the book, he is heavily featured in the book because my new book that you mentioned is called There's No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths. And the 250 economic truths are me taking a quote from different economic legends and thinkers and so forth of the past and present, and then sharing their insight and then offering my own commentary on it page by page. And I'm very happy to say, Mr. Gilder, that you appear on those pages about a dozen times. And so if my own commentary falls short, we know your original source work will not.
Oh, okay. Well, I look forward to it. Didn't Milton Friedman name one of his books "No Free Lunch"?
He did, and
of his essays or something.
It was the essays. That's right. So that famous quote, "There ain't no such thing as a free lunch," was certainly, like many things, a legacy of Milton Friedman. And so folks like Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek, Ludwig von Mises, and even going back much older to the Adam Smiths and David Ricardos of the late 18th, early 19th century make their way in the book. And you have much to say in the book about very important topics related to economics and knowledge. And now you've written a new piece here in National Review. It's quite interesting that I get to quote things you said in Wealth and Poverty from, let's say, 40 years ago, I believe. And here we are with your new piece, Life After Capitalism, where there's still tremendously profound new insights that you're bringing to readers. And I'll start off by just maybe asking you to summarize the underlying tenet in Life After Capitalism.
Well, Life After Capitalism is some chapters of my new book that I've been working on for some time called Life After Capitalism, which will be out next year sometime, and which follows Life After Google, which is my last book. And it's really exciting to be able to come back to National Review again. I've been writing for National Review for well over 50 years, maybe 60 years. I hate to say it. But anyway, I was friends with Bill Buckley for years, and it's just exciting to have a cover story in National Review at age 81. I set a Boilermaker post 80 all-time record a couple weeks ago, so I'm still running, at least, if not writing. The theme of Life After Capitalism is we're in a world of kind of emergency socialism in the United States. You know, if you can really declare a crisis and then assume emergency powers at any pretext, from vague and really unsupportable theories about the effects of CO2 emissions on the weather. I mean, that becomes a crisis which justifies transforming all American economic policy. COVID is another flu, a bad flu season, but it doesn't affect young people hardly at all. And it's a way overblown crisis, but it's an emergency, and it actually leads to socialist and even authoritarian policies all across the country. And so I think that in the United States, at least, we are living in some kind of world after capitalism. But despite all these, what I regard to be appalling policies, information theory does allow us to get a different perspective on the economy than is afforded by most of the statistical apparatus of modern day government economics. It turns out GDP figures, inflation figures, propositions of zero interest rates, all these theses about our experience are falsified by a revolution in economics, which was launched essentially by Claude Shannon in the guise of his information theory, which enabled the computer age and the bandwidth revolution, the internet, all these developments in information technology, which ultimately manifest themselves even in the new COVID vaccines, all have their roots in information theory. And I believe that information theory more satisfactorily explains our economic reality than do the current apparatus that describes the economy to us. And it's a new theory of economics, but it's imported from the dominant science of our time, and really the dominant science in the U.S. economy, so that it's relevant to economics at a minimum. It's because it underlies the internet, and but it's also relevant to economics because it's a theory that can be imported directly into economics.
And so I think that is where I'd love to drill in a little bit. When the somewhat provocative title, Life After Capitalism, and you refer to this paradigm right now of emergency socialism, it has a lot of anti-capitalistic characteristics, but is information theory contradictory to the classical economics that some of us have been brought up in, or is it complementary? And maybe you could just define what you mean by information theory.
Well, I think the key propositions are that revolve around whether a capitalist economy is chiefly based on incentives as almost all the prevailing theories contend, or whether it's ultimately based on information. And I believe that capitalism is not chiefly an incentive system. It's an information system. And that the incentive theory, which can be summed up as in the heart of all the economic models that are used throughout the profession, is this homo economicus at the center. He's optimizing for rewards and avoiding punishments, and he's agent of forces beyond himself. He's not really a creative force. He's part of a deterministic web that ultimately governs his activities, and which pushes human creativity, which is the heart of all economic growth and progress, to the side. It renders it exogenous. It's not really part of the economy. And this is a fundamental mistake. And I guess the three propositions, I might as well get them up here, that sort of sum up the theory, is that wealth is knowledge. And this is, as Thomas Sowell said years ago in Knowledge and Decisions, the Neanderthal in his cave had all the natural resources we have today. The difference between our age and the Stone Age is entirely the accumulation of knowledge about the world. Professor at MIT made the point in a different way. He said, when an expensive car crashes into a wall, all the value disappears, even though every molecule and atom remains. The car is information. Its value derives from the knowledge embodied in it. It's not a matter of atoms and molecules. It's not a function of materialism. And I believe that the great mistake that even conservative economics has made is to accept the fundamental proposition of materialism, that ultimately we're all functions of chemistry and physics. It's what I call a flat universe theory that banishes everything important and exalts ultimately random fluctuations of molecules and atoms.
And so I want to get to the other two components of the thesis. Wealth is knowledge is number one.
Yeah.
But you're digging into one of my favorite topics in the field of economics that I think is so important, which is, of course, the creativity of mankind. And I would argue that of the creation process, that because man was made in the image of his creator with dignity, that we share in these characteristics of rationality, of creativity, of a capacity for productivity that our creator himself has.
Yeah. Well,
and yeah, it sounds like
the entrepreneur is creative in the image of his creator. That's the fundamental proposition of the information theory of economics.
And yet the anthropological economic argument is one that many classical economists would have made, many supply side economists would make. It seems that what you're arguing is that too many in the incentive system of economics go down a rabbit hole. They take it too far. They take it too deterministically What is the distinction that you think is inherent about focusing on incentives as opposed to a trap that some may fall into?
Well, I mean, incentives obviously pervade our lives, but incentives ultimately kind of can be transmuted into a theory that essentially wealth is created by greed. I mean, that's sort of a prevailing proposition. And I think that incentive economics doesn't give us a good answer to that critique. And in the article, I tell about exchange between Robert Reich and
Musk.
and Mitchell. Anyway, Robert Reich and a leading supply sider at AEI had a debate, and Reich about billionaires, and Reich said we should have a wealth tax and abolish billionaires. The billionaires are just indefensible. They make no contribution, and they'd be just as willing to work for $50 million or $100 million as for these billions they supposedly wield. And I don't know why my memory is failing here, but it's Dan Mitchell, of course. He's an old friend of mine. I hate that. But anyway, Dan said that, he hoped there would be 100 more billionaires because it would mean that 100 people had figured out dramatic, important ways to improve all our lives. And if they couldn't be rewarded with these huge kind of profits and benefits, they might retire to beaches and yachts and stop making their contributions to the economy. And I think this kind of sterile debate is where the incentive theory of economics has taken us. And it's to be arguing whether Bezos and Zuckerberg or whoever would get up in the morning and go to work if they didn't have billions of dollars of rewards in view somehow is just irrelevant to what Bezos and the other entrepreneurs do. It's not that their wealth is not a product of incentives, isn't designed as a reward for their inventiveness, and it's not a reward. It's capital. It's what they deploy to expand their business. And under capitalism, capital migrates not to people who spend money best or spend capital best, but to those who can expand it best. Mm-hmm. And so it just is. To be arguing over whether Mark Zuckerberg deserves $1 billion or needs $1 billion to motivate his incandescent creativity or whatever that you can imagine, it's just irrelevant and stupid. It's not, and it pushes capitalist economics into a very sort of quixotic impasse, and or really cul-de-sac, and so I think, and it allows somebody like Dan Mitchell, who's a brilliant analyst, to maybe lose the debate to Bob Reich. I've debated Bob Reich hundreds of times, and I suppose I might have lost debates to Bob Reich, but
I have a very hard time believing that, but I'll take you at your humble word. But I guess my question would be, where do you see incentives when you do not look to the billionaire model? Where do you see incentives as relevant to the lower classes of the economy? In other words, do you believe that there is merit to the argument that before one has achieved an economic security, that incentives matter? And does your information theory become more heightened after a baseline of economic security?
I essentially, well, I believe that incentives, or as I put it, greed in wealth and poverty, leads as by an invisible hand to an ever-growing welfare state. Because the truly greedy person, he turns to government to aid his work and to gain special advantages and privileges, and this is really what its pure incentive system entails: an ever-growing welfare state. It leads to socialism, not a free market system.
And the bridge you're building there is that cronyism kicks in, so that once one has achieved a material success that was driven out of a greed, that then they look to the magistrate as a sort of accomplice in their business to filter out competition, to produce a regulatory apparatus that is protective of their interest.
A gigantic welfare state where politicians essentially bribe voters to vote for them.
So why should the response to that not be, let's have a smaller magistrate so that they are less efficacious in the crony interest of the incentive-driven, greedy capitalist?
Well, I just think all the concern with incentives, again, incentives apply everywhere to socialists and capitalists and everybody else. And so I just think it really is almost irrelevant to the growth of the economy. The growth of the economy comes from the growth of knowledge. The best definition of the growth of knowledge is learning. And I've been studying learning curves throughout much of my career. Moore's law, the doubling of computer power steadily from the semiconductor industry, is really a learning curve. But learning curves, as the Boston Consulting Group and Bain and Company and McKinsey, all these consultancies have demonstrated, apply across the economy. With every doubling of total units produced and sold, costs drop between 20 and 30%. And this applies to transistors on microchips, to lines of software code, to trucking miles, to poultry eggs, to chicken breasts, to dollars of insurance policies. It's ubiquitous. And I don't think the ubiquity of learning curves is a coincidence or an accident. Learning curves are ubiquitous across a capitalist economy because capitalist growth is learning. It's a particular kind of learning tested by markets, curved by bankruptcy, bounded by bankruptcy and failure. And it's it's Popperian learning. That is, it's falsifiable learning.
Yeah.
And that is what economic growth is. It's learning processes. And this is just as true for a street sweeper as it is, or somebody working in a hotel room as it is for Jeff Bezos. They're learning all the time. And it's the learning that really impels the growth of the economy. And you can thwart learning by falsifying money, which we're massively doing in the United States today and around the world, leading to alternative monies, a whole private money revolution that's emerging in cryptocurrencies. And my book, Life After Google, is about that revolution. But there are... So that's, and then the information theory of economics ordains that money is essentially time. So, and that money is not a magic wand for central banks to control economic activity and growth. Money is manifest inexorable passage of time, which is bounds all economic decision making and creativity. It's all ultimately governed by time. And
so is that the second?
Money is the way time is fungibly manifested in transactions across an economy.
And so is that the second of the 3 points you referenced earlier? Wealth is knowledge is number 1, and
growth is learning, and money is time.
Got it.
The 3. The focus on time converges with a great discovery, I think, made by William Nordhaus. There's a Yale economist who investigated the advance of lighting throughout the history of the human race. How many hours a typical worker had to spend to earn light, the amount of light that might illuminate a room or open up the night to human beings. And certainly light is absolutely intrinsic, canonical kind of technological product for lighting, artificial lighting. And Nordhaus proceeded from cave fires of cavemen through the candles at Versailles and on into whale oil and kerosene, and then lighting through all the cascading and innovations of electrical lighting, and showed that economists just completely missed. They were writing the dismal science. They were echoing the dark satanic mills of Blake. William Blake, the poet, spoke of dark satanic mills at the very time that the world was undergoing a tremendous millionfold rise in the total availability of light per hour that a worker had to expend to earn it. And Nordhaus ultimately calculated that that this consumer surplus, if you want, this benefit of economic creativity and advance, real economic growth, was 100,000-fold the mistake that economists made in calculating economic progress during all this period was a factor of 100,000. And today, we make a similar mistake in estimating the real value of smartphones and all the incredible diversity of apps and enhancements of our lives that are imparted by the advance of knowledge and also the pervasive expansion of learning around the world, which really constitutes the essence of economic growth. And the mistake is probably as big as Nordhaus estimated with his essay on lighting. And anyway, but so time price, I've been very interested in time prices and been working with Gail Pooley at Discovery. He's an economist at Brigham Young in Hawaii. And Marian Tupy has also been co-authoring a book with Pooley about time prices. And they've gone back into the 1800s and measured time prices, and they show that the more the population grows, the more abundant grow all the commodities of life. In other words, there's no sign in time price data whatsoever of any exhaustion of resources or peak oil or peak wheat or peak rice or peak anything. That the more people there are, the more productivity there is, the more creativity, the more learning, and the cheaper commodities get. And since 1980, the 50 leading commodities of life that they define, from salmon to rice to oil to copper or whatever, have dropped in time price by 75%, while the population grew 75%.
Even as there's scarcity.
And while CO2 expanded, agricultural production around the world boomed as measured by time prices.
And so is the argument there that the scarcity did not change, but the time price did, in the sense that it became more convenient in time to mine those resources, and therefore created price drops in these various elements, even as their demand was they didn't move on the demand curve?
Well, the essence of it is that effectively the material what we call resources are really almost irrelevant. Human beings, the human minds are what produce economic growth. The atoms of the universe are essentially unlimited, and they can be reassembled into any variety of resources as we want. They can be imported to all the cells in our body. DNA is information code. There's a material genome, as Mark Mills, who's just written a great book about technology called The Cloud, and it's information that is and as Julian Simon put it, the human mind is the ultimate resource, and all other resources are really irrelevant. They're really an optical illusion. They're created by human inventiveness and learning.
So one of the things you do in the essay the National Review has published is you refer to Friedrich Hayek's simply incomparable essay about the use of knowledge in society, as sort of a early acceptance of information theory
Yeah.
in contemporary conservative economics. And I have used the use of knowledge in society. I'm teaching high school students economics right now as a sort of introduction to the knowledge problem, where we take the thesis more in the negative of the knowledge that the central planner cannot have.
Yeah.
But you point out Hayek's point, both explicitly and, of course, by inference, is a reference to the knowledge that the decision maker, the risk taker, the entrepreneur can have. This seems highly compatible with what you're elaborating on in information theory here, 70 years after Hayek wrote this essay.
Yeah, well, that's all true. I mean, it was a pioneering essay, and I think it helped inspire Sowell in his thinking about knowledge and decisions, and it probably spurred Solow and his Nobel laureate. This is the work at MIT, which essentially discovered that almost all productivity advance was outside the data. Solow sort of anticipated Nordhaus's findings, but in a sort of general way, finding that 80 to 90% of all productivity growth was exogenous. It wasn't measured in economic statistics. And what I think we're talking about here is really a major failure of economics as a result of an effort to mimic Newtonian physics and a deterministic and materialistic foundation that Marx sort of reinterpreted as a class struggle over limited resources. And it's I think economists have failed to capture creativity and creativity.
But George, how did von Mises in Human Action fail to capture creativity? Do you think he just didn't go far enough? I'm trying to reconcile the way that
all these guys, the Austrians got most of it. I think I'm essentially an Austrian in my theory, but von Mises, they didn't have information theory. I mean, they didn't have entropy theory, which the key insight was Hirschman of Princeton said, creativity always comes as a surprise to us. And he'd done, Albert Hirschman had done a study for the UN of all foreign aid projects around the world and which ones succeeded and which ones failed, and the role of planning in foreign aid. And he could find no correspondence between the plans of various foreign aid projects and the outcome. There just wasn't any correlation. But every now and then, the project would be a success, and the success derived from some unexpected contribution of creativity by the people conducting the projects. They took it a new direction, and as Hirschman said, creativity always comes as a surprise to us. If it didn't, we wouldn't need it, and government planning would work. But he found that government planning could not be shown to work to achieve its goals anywhere. I mean, it was really quite a bad news for the UN group. And so the real root of information theory and economics is Claude Shannon, the founder of information theory in the 1940s and 50s, and who developed it in computer science and communications science, and is really the heart of all our information industries. He defined information not as order or as von Mises and the Austrians really erred in defining information as somehow order, and how economies achieve spontaneous order. And Shannon said, and Hirschman said, no, information is not order, it's disorder. Information is unexpected bits. Information is surprise. That's and he got a mathematical formula that defines surprise in a communication system, and that thesis that Claude Shannon developed in 1948 is still used in and his mathematics of surprisal pervade all our networks, all the internet, all our computers are all really enabled, because unless you can measure what you're transmitting, you can't really tell how much capacity you need to allocate to different networks and systems. And so he really showed that information itself is surprisal. And you see the parallel between Hirschman. Creativity always comes as a surprise, and Shannon's mathematics of entropy, as he called it, entropy is surprisal. And the two, it allows you to do a model of the economic system that actually captures entrepreneurial creativity as surprisal in a communications system. And that's really what I do in my several books now about the information theory of economics. Knowledge and Power and Scandal of Money and Life After Google are all really developing this theory that I hope to formulate more fully in Life After Capitalism.
Will your intent be, George, as you elaborate on the thesis and the application of information theory to economics, will your intent be to develop something systematic? Do you believe that this can be something exhaustive in our understanding of free enterprise, of human action, human behavior? Or tell us what the kind of key takeaway will be when this exercise is complete.
I think it will conclude that information theory is the appropriate system to capture economic reality, and that this effort to build economic systems and models on the basis of humans optimizing for rewards and punishments, and a kind of mathematical and ultimately materialist formulation of carrots and sticks and is going to be supplanted. That people will use, for example, information as surprise transcends all the averages. Economists are always creating averages of everything, and the interest rate is an average of returns across an economy, and averages destroy information. Averages are a way of taking all the information, which is the disorder, the unexpected results, and creating an average which seems to be definitive, but in fact misses the gain of knowledge, the progress of learning.
But you mean the centrally planned interest rate?
Well, all interest rates are there. The interest rate represents the average of returns across the economy in general.
But information theory wouldn't supplant the price mechanism.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it reinterprets it.
Okay.
I mean, as Gail Pooley puts it, for one thing, learning curves invert the supply curve.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, the usual, as I say in the article, the supply in a sort of static economic model, volumes increase when the price goes up. The supply curve goes up as prices rise, and learning curve economics, volumes increase as the price goes down, 20 to 30% with every doubling of units sold. You have declining prices with volume, and as prices decline, people use the product in more different ways, and the process of learning increases and cascades to all contiguous markets and throughout the whole economy. And in fact, measured by information theory, and time prices, which is the measurement that information theory provides. Economic growth has been much faster than anybody estimates. I mean, Nordhaus estimated 100,000 times faster, just all across the economy. Deflation, as we call it, as if it's somehow a menace, is proceeding massively. And most of the GDP figures we see are very deceptive and misleading, and they're dominated by government spending, which is mostly worthless. And so we really don't understand what's going on in the economy, even in the basis of GDP figures that conservatives have in general respected, and I respected for most of my career. I mean, this has really been given me a new perspective on, and it poses some challenges. I mean, it seems that government policy can be incredibly bad without durably retarding the progress of entrepreneurial activity. It flows around the world, it shifts to other countries, but wherever entrepreneurs are allowed to learn and to apply their learning in reasonable markets of some sort, progress continues, even while we have preposterous monetary policies, printing up trillions of new dollars and imagining that somehow constitutes wealth.
So you make the point in the essay that money is time, and that's something we've talked about already here today. And it seems really easily understandable the way you write about it, that we have finite time, and if we didn't, we would have unlimited earning power. And so effectively the inverse identity really helps us see that money is time. But then you say, but time is not money. And there's a point you're making there, but I wonder if you'd unpack why the opposite is not true in the same way the money is time dictum is.
Because money does have to be invented. I mean, how to create units that can be propagated across an economy fungibly is an invention. It's and the great breakthrough was the discovery that gold is kind of immune to time. I mean, this is as Jude Winniski used to say, it takes about the same amount of time to extract an ingot of gold today or troy ounce of gold today as it did 1,000 years ago. I mean, then it might be panned from a stream in a sieve, and now it has to be extracted from deep in the earth, the gigantic mining equipment. But in the end, it takes about the same amount of time to extract an incremental troy ounce of gold as it did back then. This is why gold became the canonical monetary metal, and it's not because it's valuable as jewelry or something. My friend Richard Vigilante said, I like to quote him. He said that money is not valuable because it's jewelry. Jewelry is valuable because it's really money.
Yeah.
But I think a further step, which is to recognize that money is ultimately time. It's what remains scarce when everything else becomes abundant. Yeah. When you run out of money, you aren't running out of some unit of wealth or something. You're essentially running out of the time to earn more money. Right. And it's essentially money is time, but it's complicated and we're now in a great adventure in cryptocurrencies to reinvent money, and in a way that captures this intrinsic scarcity that time imparts to all our lives and activities. The speed of light and the span of life are the kind of boundaries of our domains as human beings, and money is a great invention that captures this essential constraint on all our transactions and behavior.
Well, I think that our listeners would appreciate a basic summary. I will say that the article, the essay that we refer to, that the National Review Institute has sponsored, and that George Gilder has contributed to National Review on this subject, is a powerful introduction to the topic. And as he alluded to about the book that will come out next year, there is still more elaboration and more application to come. But if there's anything I've learned from reading George Gilder over the years, it is that his ability to plant seeds of basic concepts and then really see them fertilize and unfold into a really very compelling application is unparalleled. And I have no doubt the same will be true here. The information theory to effectively replace the more limited understanding of incentive-based economics, which George would argue is fundamentally materialistic, where information theory allows for a fuller praxeology, a fuller understanding of the human person, their God-given abilities, creativity, and instincts, that wealth is knowledge, that growth is learning, and that money is time. These concepts understood into economics applied, I think, are going to be very powerful. I think there's more work to be done. I'm sure, George, you'd agree.
I agree.
But I appreciate you planting the seeds here, allowing us to have this discussion. And I certainly appreciate National Review Institute supporting this essay. I hope you have benefited from it. I think it is a really exciting part of the value proposition of National Review Institute. These long form pieces are very compelling. We do not advocate an anti-intellectual conservatism at National Review. And I believe that these long form pieces help do exactly what George has done in this essay, plant seeds for further understanding, for further conversation, and of course, for further application. And to that end, we're going to host another event like this on Veterans Day with John Hillen. My colleague at National Review is going to interview H.R. McMaster on his long form piece, The Warrior Ethos. And so I hope you've enjoyed this talk with myself and George Gilder here today. Look forward to our next event like this, and allow me just in my remaining moment here to thank you, George, for spending this hour with us here today.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate National Review, but for, as I said, 50 years I've been writing for them, and it's really a privilege to be part of this National Review Institute activity.
Well, thank you again, George. And with that, I will dismiss our time today.
Thank you.